Okay, teachers, there's a reason I'm not smiling, and it's because today we need to talk about something kind of serious. So, the normal, happy, bubbly Sierra is going to take a little pause to make sure that we understand the severity of what we are about to talk about. Do you want to know what that is? It's classroom libraries. Yes, I said it. Our classroom library is the heartbeat of our classroom. It's the most important area of the four walls that your students are in. And it's so important that we're going to spend this video talking about how you, the teacher, needs to make sure that you are spending time analyzing your classroom library to make sure it is at the top condition and perfect and ready for your students. So come and join me. We're going to chat about how you can go about analyzing your classroom library and walk away with my free library analysis printable that's going to help you do that. All right, so I've got some great information for you, some things that we're going to really reflect on, and then some action steps that we are going to take as well. So, like I said, your classroom library is your heartbeat of your classroom. The emphasis that you put on your library can indirectly impact your students' attitudes towards reading. So think about it. If your classroom library is bare, boring, not colorful, not inviting, and you don't go in there yourself or spend very much time in there, and you don't emphasize the area of your classroom as well, what message is that sending to your students? That's an area that's not important, is the message they're going to receive. So if we're not excited about the library, if we don't take pride in our library, if we don't spend time in our library, then how will our students? It makes sense. You're modeling this excitement and motivation that you want out of your students for reading, okay? Now, I know that classroom libraries are very hard to build, and it's because teachers shouldn't have to spend their own money to buy books. Now, back when I started teaching, I walked into my bare classroom, like I know all of you probably did, and I was lucky because the teacher that left became the principal of that school that I was teaching at. And so he was able to take his classroom library and he took it and divided it amongst all the new teachers that were hired that year. So I had, a stack of books to start off with. But that summer I knew that that was not going to be enough. So I did what I had to do because I knew how important library was going to be in my classroom. That love of reading was going to be my number one goal, and a classroom library that emphasizes that and showcases that had to happen. It had to be there. So I scoured garage sales. I looked for library sales. I always see them at my local library, but I would look at surrounding cities as well that maybe were like in a 20-minute drive where it wasn't that far. I found some great deals there. Another great tip, with Facebook groups being so huge right now, you can go in and ask for donations. There are tons of families who have older kids, but they haven't gotten rid of their books yet from when they were younger. So maybe you ask for donations for your classroom, and I guarantee you're going to end up with a few boxes full. So yes, we should not have to do this. Yes, we should not have to spend our own money. However, my money in one summer collecting books is worth knowing that my students are going to have that love of reading when they leave. So, Scholastic book clubs too. That's another great suggestion. So anyways, making sure that you have built the classroom library that you know your students deserve is important. So, but what if you are unable to do that? Because I get it. It's teachers. Think about the salary we make. Totally understand. But if that is the case, then the school library needs to become your best friend. Absolute best friend. You must be able to make it a priority in your routine to go to the library as a class, and also make sure that your students have ample opportunity to go to the library throughout the week, just as they would in your own classroom library, they need to feel as welcomed and encouraged to go to the school library as well. Again, we're talking today about analyzing the classroom library, but I wanted to make sure I emphasize just how important having a library was and making sure that you knew that there were opportunities out there to build it without having to spend your money or what to do if you can't. So here's my question though. Yes, you go through all of this work, you spend your own money, and you have tons of books, and look, you have a great classroom library. But does having a lot of books equal having a strong classroom library? Not yet. Not yet. We're not there. Okay, here is why. There are other aspects that we have to consider when building and analyzing our classroom library. So I've got 5 different areas that we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to show you your free printable that you can grab to help you do some of these today, okay? So you've done the hard work, you've got your library now. Now here's what we need to do. And I also encourage you to do this every year. This is something that we need to get into the routine in the summertime, maybe during your back to school, maybe you do it at the end of the year, whatever feels right to you. This is something that needs to happen not just when you start teaching, but needs to happen frequently to ensure that your library stays strong. Because if you just buy all the books and throw them on shelves and never do anything with it, in a few years, it's going to become a not so strong library. And here's why. So you want to make sure that in your library, you have a balance of old and new published books. So yes, you can have your classics in there like Berenstain Bears. Maybe you've got some Clifford. Maybe you've got some Little Critters and some older classics like Corduroy and things like that. And that's great. But you want to make sure that your whole classroom library isn't just filled with classics and old published books. And I don't mean old as necessarily in like material and, you know, how sturdy they are right now. I really do mean like how and when they were published. So nowadays authors are, you know, more open to writing about different things. They're more aware of cultures and, you know, family dynamics and different things like that. So the newer publications that are coming out are going to really help fill a lot of gaps that we're actually going to talk about here in a second. So making sure that you have new books and old books. I always gave myself a budget every year, whether it be through like the Scholastic book clubs or I would go to half price books or something. And I would say, okay, I'm going to buy X amount of new books this year to add to my library. And you can even get your students involved with this too. Like make sure they have a voice. What books do they want? So when you go and do your interest surveys and things at the beginning of the year, take that into consideration. Look at that information and say, my kids are interested in blank, blank, and blank, and I need books for that. So I'm going to go and find those books. Or my kids really like this author, but yet I only have one of their books. So I'm going to go get more of those. So if you want your students to read more, we've got to do the work to make sure that the books they want are available and can get into their hands. It's our responsibility to do this. And if we don't want to buy them, but then again, we go to the school library and we find them. Or we tell the school librarian, hey, buy these. Like my kids want them, please buy them and let me know when they're in because I will send my kids down for them or I'll come get them myself. But you got to do the work for it, okay? If your students are unmotivated to read, it may be because they just don't have the right book in their hand. You know, I can't just pick up any old book off a bookshelf and be motivated to read it. Neither can they, okay? So a good balance between old published and newer published books. Another thing that you want to think about is, do you have a variety of genres outside of just your normal fiction and nonfiction? I can't tell you the amount of times that when I would do my classroom library introduction, basically I would have students go, I had no idea this even existed. And by this, they meant genres that they had no idea were available to them. So in your library, do you have things like poetry? Do you have bilingual books that are written in English and maybe in another language? Do you have Sci-fi. Do you have horror? Now, horror, maybe I wouldn't introduce maybe to like, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. Those little kids are probably too little scared, but like Goosebump books, those would be your more older published, but they fill a hole for a genre. Do you have mystery books? Do you have historical fiction books? So you need to really think about, yes, I have fiction, but do I have more than just normal fiction with, animals talking and things like that? There's so many more genres out there that are going to help fill gaps in where your students' interests are. And if you have those books available and you introduce them and show them off and explain what they are, you're going to get your students even more excited and motivated to want to read those. Okay. So again, analyze your library for that wide variety of genres. Another make sure that you do or have is, do you have a strong organizational method for your library? If your books are just on the shelf, like just put it on the shelf, make sure the spine is, facing out and it's in there nice and neat. Yes, those are great rules to have, but how is your student going to find a book that they really want to read? They're going to have to search and search and search, right? We don't go to Barnes & Noble and literally have random shelves just full of books and we have to search through them. If I want a romance novel, I know to go to that section. If I want a mystery, I know to go to this section. That's the experience we need to create for our students, making sure that your organizational method is represented of the types of books that you have available. So maybe you have a whole section for graphic novels. Maybe you have a whole section for historical fiction. I had a whole tub of math books. Math is not really a genre, but I had all kinds of books. And so if my students wanted to read about math, they could, and they didn't have to search for those books. Now, don't go too crazy on it. Now, I would suggest in your library, and this is a question I get all the time, how do you organize your library? I would not organize by level. No. Because your students are not going to a library looking for a certain level. They should be looking for an interest that they want to read about. If you have to have them read on a level, which I don't recommend, but if you have to, then they look for a book that they want to read and then check to make sure it's on their level. That way they're thinking interest first, level second. Anyways, back up. So organizing your classroom library, I would suggest organizing by genre. And then you can also throw in series. So like Bailey School Kids, Goosebumps I mentioned, Magic Tree House, things like that. Like clearly that series can all be organized in one section, even though they're a part of another genre. You can also do authors, like I did a whole Eric Carle bin, Tommy 𝗦liche bin, things like that, where if they really like one book from that author, maybe they'll like others. And it was a way to try to showcase certain authors as well. So genre, topic, maybe for nonfiction books specifically, author, and series. That's how I would organize my library. Here's another thing to think about, and this goes along with our freebie today, is does your classroom library represent all of your students in your class? Here's a great way to think about that. Your library should mirror the population of your students in your class. So let's give an example. Maybe you have a class full of Caucasian, white boys and girls. That's just the school that you live in. That's the population. That's who's in your classroom. And your books have all, African-American children in them. Every single one. Like there's very rarely a white kid in your books, in your collection or whatever. They should be able to see themselves in the books that you have in your library. Now, I did give that scenario. Unfortunately, it usually happens the other way around. We have kids who are in minorities, kids who are, Hispanic, from Hispanic countries, kids who are from overseas, kids who are African American. Maybe they are different religions. Maybe they're different sexualities. Whatever they are, their representation needs to be in your library. So in your freebie today, this is a great activity that I love to make sure that I do. Maybe this one, not every year, but at least every other year. And then when I get my classroom roster every year, I look to make sure I know who I'm getting and how they are represented. Are they male or are they female? What country are they from? What language do they speak? Things like that. Now, once I get to know them a little better, I can do that even on a deeper level, but I want to make sure I do that initial analyzing before they come into my classroom. But on this, you can see that all you have to do is kind of go through and tally mark the number of books you have for all of these different areas. So do you have books that represent other religions? Do you have books that have indigenous people as characters? What about visible and invisible disabilities? That's a big one. Think about your students who have maybe learning disabilities, or if you have a student who has autism in your classroom, they need to be represented as well. So maybe that has no tally marks, and that's what you're going to search for this year to add to your library. Refugees and immigrants, various types of sexuality, settings in another country. Are all of your books set in America? Yeah, maybe they have a variety of characters in them, but are they all in America? Maybe we need some different variety there. Different family structures is a big one. It's the traditional mom, dad, brother, sister isn't where our families come from anymore. Is there a book where the grandmother is raising the child? Is there a book where there are two moms or two dads or a single dad? Maybe there's a book for a foster family. Think about where your kids come from. Again, various socioeconomic statuses. Are they written in different languages? Of course, animals as characters, Caucasian characters, and characters of color. So this is a great printable to have to make sure, is there an area, an aspect of my library that I need to support more? Now, as great as your classroom library is, you're always going to find a hole, and that's okay, because it's going to take a long time to get to that perfection of classroom libraries. And even then, I guarantee you it's still not perfect, because it's just a constant moving machine. So making sure that you have that representation for all of your students, again, highly, highly important. Really recommend that. Another thing that I want you to think about is getting rid of unwanted books. I always have my students go through the classroom and they each pick one book that they definitely never want to read. And we kind of go through them together and vote on the top 10, and I get rid of those books. If no one in the class wants to read them, why should I have them? They usually tend to be older books that they're just not interested in reading. So it helps me kind of get rid of books and make room for others. And then this is another one to think about too, and this is our last one tonight. But how do you highlight special books throughout your year? Do you have a book recommendation board? Or how are you getting your students excited to get to the library and draw them in? Do you have secret date with a book where you wrap it up in brown paper and kind of write maybe a little synopsis on it to get them ooh, I want that one, and if I unwrap it, I have to read it kind of thing. Or maybe you highlight seasonal books. I always had the book organization thing in front of my desk, and every season or every month I would change out those books and put out new books for the season. So September came around, they were all fall. Then when October came around, they were all Halloween. You can kind of get the picture there, right? But how are you emphasizing and getting students excited in your library year-round rather than just making it organized, pretty, beautiful, ta-da, right? Okay, so we talked a lot today about analyzing your library. Remember, it is the most important part of your classroom. I'm sorry if you disagree, but I truly, truly believe that. Build it. If you build it, they will come, right? From the movie. And I do believe that when it comes to classroom libraries and your students' love of reading. So if you have any questions about analyzing classroom libraries, please make sure to drop me a comment below. You can also email me, Sierra@SierraHasTeaching, and I'm happy to help. So thank you, friends, for joining, and I hope you have fun analyzing your classroom libraries. And don't forget to go and grab your free library analysis printable. You can grab it down below in the description. Make sure to click that show more button if you don't see it, and it'll be right there for you. All right? Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.